What I'm going to do today is just to present to you the way I see leadership and the way leadership has evolved for me over time. And I'll walk you through a little bit of my own personal story, because I really believe that how we lead is a reflection of who we are, the experiences that we've had, the people who have mentored us, the people who have challenged us, the situations that we've encountered, that it's really hard to separate who we are as leaders from who we are as people. So it's really important that as we become emerging leaders in a variety of areas, it doesn't really matter what area, that it starts with an understanding of self. So I want to start with just the question, why positive psychology? I'm going to start with some stories, because I think stories help to frame a perspective. Positive psychology is grounded in science. That is a really essential criterion, and you'll see that there's a clear distinction that needs to be made between pop psychology, kind of armchair wisdom passed down through mom and dad, what you think is good and right and true, with what science tells us is good and right and true. And so positive psychology really is the scientific study of the good life and what we can learn about how to live a good life. So I'm going to just tell you about two women in my life. The woman on your left is my mom. And I want to read you the first sentence of the book chapter that I wrote following up on my doctoral dissertation. They always say first lines are important, so here you go. They were a peculiar lot. The hospital Coast Guard officer, the college student in the middle of her undergraduate career, the brilliant young physicist working on his second master's degree, the aspiring musician living in an apartment near his parents, the Catholic nun, and my mom. So that's the start of the chapter. That group, a very interesting and unusual group, met over a period of months as part of a research study in Massachusetts with people who are living with bipolar disorder. And the question was for them, for scientists trying to find out what that experience was like for people, and for them to be able to talk and share with each other about their experiences. One of the observations that my mother made coming out of that experience was how grateful she felt that she had been able to live a good life, that she was married. She and my dad are celebrating their 50th anniversary in 2 years, had raised 3 children, graduated from the University of California, Berkeley in 3 years. She has lived a good life. That was not necessarily the case for everybody else. So question number 1, how do you have a significant obstacle in your life? How do you deal with a mental illness and be whole and have a good life? Question. Number 2, Fiona is the woman on the right, William & Mary alumna and very dear friend still of mine. Fiona had an experience while she was a student leader here on this campus where she contracted an illness after being abroad for a period of time, and it was very mysterious, debilitating, difficult to treat, and she ended up having to spend some time away at home seeing some physicians in another part of the country. And at one point her family called Student Affairs and said, it's really important to us and to Fiona that she be back at William & Mary. Even though she's not well, even though she can't do all the things that she could do, it's really critical that she be back at William & Mary. And so she came back. She decided to drop her honors thesis, but she continued to provide leadership to the Bone Marrow Drive and several other really important initiatives on campus. She lived in the President's Cottage, which, as you know, is kind of off to the side of the President's house. She lived there during the rest of her senior year, the tail end of her senior year, having committee meetings in that apartment. And so the question in my mind was, what was it about William & Mary that made this family and this student believe that being here was so important to her well-being? Question. Not unrelated questions to me. So I was really struck as a young researcher by the idea that we can construct a good life, that we have the power to construct a good life. And that's really been my leadership framework in my role in student affairs. As I was watching that, and I've watched it several times now, so much of what positive psychology believes in is what we're trying to accomplish in the university setting. We're trying to help students find fulfillment, find meaning, find direction, a sense of purpose, relationships that matter. All of those things are a high priority for us at William & Mary, and they're certainly a high priority for student affairs. So first of all, my dissertation was called Who Flourishes in College? And it was a look at the intersection between student mental health and how students engage in their college experience. So what I used a mental health continuum that was developed by Corey Keyes, who's a faculty member at Emory University in their sociology department, which was described as the first balanced framework for understanding and promoting mental health. And I really like the drawing that showed the continuum of -8 to 0 to +8. The idea is that mental health and mental illness are not necessarily opposite ends of the same continuum. They are on two completely separate lines, and they may slope very much in sync, but not completely in sync. So, for example, you could be a flourishing individual, in other words, having a high sense of well-being and the presence of mental health qualities, and still have a mental illness. That's the way I look at my mom. She was a flourishing human being, but she had a diagnosed pathology. So they weren't necessarily mutually exclusive, although data does show they're highly correlated. So this particular continuum is not looking at mental illness at all. It's really looking at mental health. And the opposite of flourishing is languishing. Languishing does not necessarily mean that you have a diagnosable mental illness, but it is a noticed absence of the things that make us mentally healthy. So if you're a languishing person, you aren't necessarily depressed, but you experience low levels of well-being. Most of us have a sense of what it means to savor something. I certainly savor a warm cup of coffee in the morning. We savor good books, a crescendo, and a powerful piece of music, and the smell of fresh cookies baking. Then there's the crunch of autumn leaves underfoot, the extra 9 minutes of sleep that come when you hit the snooze alarm, and the tenderness of feeling someone else's hand in your own. As a student here, I savored many moments, snapshots now in the album of my memory. Sitting in the sunken garden, eating bread ends with house dressing from the cheese shop, singing Shenandoah with the William and Mary Choir, seeing the sunrise through the window of a second-floor lounge in Old Dominion, and realizing my friend and I had somehow talked the whole night away. Let's skip forward. You will have your own moments to savor. Maybe it will be the feeling of scoring the game-winning run, discerning that ideal direction for your thesis, or hearing the sound of applause the first time you perform on the main stage in Phi Beta Kappa Hall. And the idea, coming from a positive psychology perspective, again, is that it's not about fixing weakness, that it's not as important to go from negative to, okay, you're okay at that. It's more important to say, what are you good at, and let's make you excellent at that. That's so much more productive, and it's such a better use of our time and our staff resources, and it helps people feel more gratified at work. So that's one example of positive psychology in terms of individual qualities. One I want to share with you because it's the easiest one, and empirically the data shows that a sense of gratitude is one of the most tangible things you can do to immediately increase your sense of well-being. So I highlight that for you. I highlight it with my own kids. When they're struggling with something, one of my challenges, and I do this with my son who's in college, he's a freshman this year, and when I hear that there's something going on, my response to him is, text me 3 good things. Text me 3 good things. And it's amazing how that can turn your framework. It can reframe whatever it is that you're struggling with. So conscious gratitude helps you feel better about your life, more optimistic, joyful. People exercise more. This is great in workplaces. If we express gratitude to one another, what kind of a different environment are we creating when people are actually feeling well? And there's a higher sense of well-being. So I would challenge you in your organizations. Think about what gratitude can look like in your organization. How do you express gratitude to one another, to your fellow leaders, to your members, to people who have done something to support an initiative that you're a part of?